Good morning and welcome to the Florida Aviation Network. My name is Ron Timmermans. I'm one of the many hosts for the Florida Aviation Network, and we're broadcasting to you today live from the campus of the EA Sun and Fun International Fly-In and Expo at Lakeland Linder Regional Airport in Lakeland, Florida. It's great to have you with us today. We have an incredible list of people that we're going to be covering in interviews this week. And one of them is the very interesting Mr. Mike Adams, a Senior Vice President with Avemco Insurance Company. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. It's good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Right. Great. So Mike, I can imagine if you've risen to the level of Senior Vice President of Avemco Insurance, you've probably been with them for a while and probably even longer with the aviation insurance industry. Can you tell us a bit about your background, please?
Sure, yeah. A little bit of my background is I got into aviation because I've always loved aviation. And then I tried to figure out a way I could make a living in aviation and not be a pilot. I think I'm a pretty decent pilot, but not that good. So I got into the insurance side of it and started out with National Aviation Underwriters. For some of us that have been around for a while, you'll recognize that name. Avemco Insurance purchased National Aviation in 1986. I started in '83 actually with National. So I've been underwriting and selling aviation risks and policies since 1983, starting out originally in the Pacific Northwest in the Seattle, Washington area, and then in the Portland, Oregon area, and then ended up back in Frederick, Maryland in 1999. Have been there ever since. So
I see.
A West Coast transplant. Shout out to all of my Oregonian friends. Come visit me on the East Coast. We'll give you a tour.
That's great. Yeah. Do any of them come from Oregon to visit you in Maryland?
Actually, I do have quite a few people that when they end up living close to D.C. is an advantage, and a lot of people come into meetings and conferences in D.C., and it's an easy weekend. Frederick is just about 45 minutes northwest of Washington, D.C., right in the south of the Mason-Dixon line, so a lot of history, Civil War and things that go on there, plus Fort McHenry and the Baltimore Harbor. So
indeed there is.
Great area to live.
It is. I lived for a while just south of Baltimore in Odenton, and it was a great place to be and to visit, and close to Avemco and AOPA and all the aviation events and the like there. So quite a few years with Avemco and obviously in the aviation insurance industry. I'm glad you're able to make a good living out of your quest in aviation, because not all pilots make it to the big time, do they?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like that old joke of what? Get out of aviation? I won't tell the rest of it. So.
Right. I think I know where that goes as well. Yes, so we've got a couple of topics that I was hoping that you would share with us today. One of them is under it's rather a sensitive description. Some would refer to it as elder pilots or very mature pilots. Is that a consideration when people are getting applying for renewal of their policies or getting a new policy with Avemco?
It is in a sense. Senior pilot's another term that can be used for it out there. Avemco, our history is we've been insuring senior pilots for a number of years. In fact, we had an age discrimination lawsuit against us in California many years ago. So we did a survey of the number of pilots that we insured versus the general population over a certain age. And it turned out at the time that we insured about 15 to 20% of the population. So that age discrimination lawsuit went against, we won that one. We continued to insure the individual on there. And what that lawsuit had to do with is that the person was flying a rather complex airplane, and they were getting quite old, although nowadays would still be considered fairly young. He's around 80. And so we put a requirement that they do an annual flight review and they see a physician on an annual basis. And the reason that we do that, one is, in this case, is we wanted to make sure the pilot was still competent, had all their faculties in order to fly the plane safely. And as an insurance company, when we issue a policy contract to you, we're making an agreement that we're going to defend your assets and settle within policy limits when able. And that's our number one goal, is to settle a policy claim against you and still protect all your assets. And we found that in this case, having someone that did flight training on an annual basis and did an annual physical exam with a doctor gave us that defense that we needed, because the plaintiff's attorney will normally come out and say, well, here we've got an older pilot, and you know how older people are, they can't drive cars, etc. And we're going, well, au contraire, with this individual, not only did they meet the FAA requirements, but they exceeded them. They're within 5 months of a flight review, let's say, or they're within 3 months of a medical. So they're medically and mentally sound, plus their pilot skills are up to par. And so, I mean, and that's the main goal that Avemco has, is we're in a partnership where, yeah, we're your insurance company, but we also want to work with you to make sure that, one, you stay safe and you're a good defendable risk, and we can protect your assets within the policy limits.
Certainly, and that isn't by any means unreasonable, but because most of us will get a wellness checkup, a health check with our family practice physician at least once a year. And being a purveyor of flight training myself, I think it's extremely important that pilots, all pilots, regardless of what they're flying, submit to recurrent training with an instructor or with an aviation professional at least once a year. Some of the folks that I fly with an instructor twice a year or more. And recognizing that our skills, no matter how good they are, from one training session to the next, we immediately begin to atrophy some of those skills. And so keeping those up, regardless of our age, is probably a good idea no matter what.
Yes, and our statistics do prove that out when we look at our claims history. And we've been promoting annual flight training for a number of years now. In fact, for any of you that do the WINGS program as a pilot, when you complete both the knowledge and the flight portion, and you get the little pop-up on the screen that says, do you want WINGS pins, and you check yes, it's Avemco that's notified of that. We put the cover letter in there saying, congratulations, we're the company that buys the wings and handles the fulfillment to send them out. And we'd like to send out a lot more wings, because that generally means we'll be working on a lot less claims, which, you know, a claim is a bad day for the pilot, it's a bad day for the insurance company. And so if you can do some training, we've just found that, particularly germane to the type of flying you're doing, it will decrease your potential of having an accident. If you're a tailwheel and you're into a crosswind situation in the spring, like in the Midwest states, go out and make sure your crosswind techniques are valid. If you're in the mountain states and you do backcountry mountain flying, it never hurts to go out in the springtime after kind of a winter layoff to make sure that you're as good as you remember you were last fall after you've been flying all summer.
I like that. Make sure you're as good as you remember you are, you want to remember you are, exactly. And I'm also very pleased that Avemco is the one that sponsors the WINGS lapel pins for the WINGS program. As a flight instructor, I frequently will talk with my clients, and when we finish a flight review, I offer them a WINGS credit to validate WINGS credit, and I've told them about the pins that we can get. So that's great. I personally hold all three different WINGS symbols, and so thank you very much to Avemco for making those available. That's great.
Congratulations.
And mostly support for the WINGS program. Although it's an FAA program, it's really available to all of us, and we should be pursuing that WINGS credit. We might as well get credit for the extra flight training that we do, because it does make us a more skilled pilot, allows us to have more fun, and makes us a better risk for when we go to Avemco or someone else for insurance to get coverage for ourselves and for our airplanes to cover that and our assets. So that's great. That's great. So we were talking earlier about elder or mature pilots and why you, Avemco and probably other insurers as well, look to specify specific training routine and frequency of health examinations. So at what age do you begin to show concern for pilots submitting to annual training and the like?
Excellent question. That kind of depends upon the complexity of the aircraft and how they're operating it. A little bit of a diversionary story here. I get pop-ups on Google Alerts that talk about aviation, and so one of them popped up and it talked about a pilot flying on their 100th birthday. And so I went out and I read the article, fully expecting to hear about the son or the daughter that drove their dad or mom to the airport, got in a plane with a CFI and went around the pattern. Well, This was not that kind of a story. It was the individual that was 100 years old, owned an SLSA, and flew regularly on there, and he was going to go out and fly on his 100th birthday, which he did. So having a name and an N number on there, I'm always curious as to, did this person have insurance? Did we ever talk to him, et cetera? And lo and behold, when I put his name and N number into our policyholder database, popped right up. And so I looked at it and I said, okay, it's an SLSA. The hull value is less than $100,000. He's got the standard $1 million liability. And as long as he can hold a valid medical and a flight review, that's all he needed to do. So we did insure the fellow. He did make one comment in the article which made me feel good as an underwriter. He said that one of the things that I always do when I fly is I want to share aviation, so I either fly with a qualified pilot or I fly with a flight instructor. He says, you don't live to 100 to be by making bad decisions. So as an underwriter, I was heartened to hear that.
Sure.
Subsequently, he did pass away at 102. He sold the airplane, and actually one of the pilots that was one of his regular accompaniments bought the airplane and is still flying it there.
Very good.
There's a case where we didn't have any requirements other than meeting what the FAA required.
Interesting.
Now, if you come to me and you've got like a Cessna 340, 414, 421 or something like that, generally at age 75 or 76, we're going to start to require some kind of a accepted recurrent training on an annual basis and a physician's visit, because that's kind of the age where you've got a more complex, faster operating airplane, and we want to make sure, again, as I mentioned earlier, we've got all the mechanisms for a good defense of your assets in the event of something going wrong. And from, I guess, life experience, or I can tell you from our insurance experiences, that anytime we have a more complex machine and something that the pilot can either forget to do or can mechanically fail, the potential of a loss goes up. And so we want to make sure that we mitigate those type activities, at least from the human side, from the pilot. We expect the plane to be an annual, and we make an assumption that they're going to a qualified shop that's making sure the plane's in good shape. And if you're a conscientious owner, when you get a recommendation to improve or change something out from the shop in order for the annual to be completed, that's being done.
Yeah,
so
very good, very good.
So if you've got a 172, as long as you can carry a basic med and pass a flight review every 2 years, you're good with us.
Okay, well,
we're good with you.
That's good to know. That's good to know. Well, like your one client, Mike, I too, as probably other people that are watching as well, would say, I want to be that client at 100 years of age as well, still flying, still being insurable and the like, and being in good health, and then consequently make it my decision as to when to quit and hang up the wings for flying. But that's great. That's a very encouraging news story. I've got a ways to go before the 100-year mark, yeah. But it's coming ever quicker, it seems like. So,
and it accelerates the closer you get.
It does. It's darn it works that way, but I guess it does for all of us. So, but it's better than the alternative, I believe. So that's good. That's good. Well, thanks for sharing that story. It's always good to hear that an aging pilot or a mature pilot like that can continue flying and get insurance, because that's an important part of being able to fly, of course.
Right.
So. You mentioned underwriters. So we were talking earlier before we went on camera about the underwriters for Avemco being slightly different than underwriters for other insurance companies. Can you give us a little bit of insight there, please?
Yes. The Avemco is a direct writer insurance company, and so it's our policy. We don't deal through general agents. So if you've got an insurance question on our policy or a coverage question, you're talking to an underwriter that deals with that policy every day, knows the ins and outs of it. And if there's ever a question or a claim or something on the wordings of the policy, it's we that take care of it. Again, rather than if you deal through an agent, and I have nothing against dealing through agents. My personal lines, I work through agents and stuff on that. I know aviation insurance. I think I understand homeowners a little bit. Totally clueless on life, but so I go to those experts. But with Avemco, again, you give us a call, we can work up a proposal for you, we can explain our policy. It doesn't impact anything you're doing anywhere else, because again, we're not in that market of dealing through agents on there. So when someone says as an agent, I cover all the markets, that's not totally true, because they can't get a quote through Avemco. And it's just like, from Avemco's point of view, if you ask us questions about your policy, we may be able to answer some general things on it, because we do try and keep track of our competitors, but we're not the expert on it. It's not our policy. Right. But if you have a question on our policy, a coverage situation, do we cover off airport? Do we have any exclusions? How far north do we go? Incidentally, we'll go up to all of Alaska if you're based in Alaska. We'll go up to 67 degrees if you're based in the lower 48. So you can get into southern Alaska if you want, and quite a bit of Canada. Sorry, shameless plug there. But it is, again, our policy, and you are dealing direct with us when you do give us a call. We can generally issue coverage right away, and if you had to add an airplane, add a pilot, make a change, it's very easy to do. We often email out a confirmation of the change within 15 minutes of the conversation.
Wow, yeah. Okay. So among other things, what Avemco has to offer is one call to your underwriter who can pretty much answer all your questions, give you an update on quotes, or give you a new quote. Pretty much all over the phone is where insurance quotes come now today. Is that correct? That
is absolutely correct. If you're more interested in contacting us late in the evening or early in the morning via the web, you can request a quote or put in a question on our website. Generally, we reply within the next business day on that, and we can email back a proposal to you. If you come up with a real long, convoluted question, you may get an email from us that said, when's a good time I can call you? Because, what appears to be a simple question, like, can I take a friend and have a Canadian pilot fly with me to Alaska, and is he covered as a pilot? That's an easy question to you. You think, well, that's a yes or no answer, and unfortunately, that's a long answer as to, where are you? What are the qualifications of the other pilot? What type of plane do you have? Do they meet the Canadian regs, or do they have the equivalent of a U.S. certificate type thing?
Sure.
So we prefer a phone call, but we can deal electronically if you want to use emails and websites.
Well, that's good. So you can get, among other things, a quote electronically over the telephone. Oh, and speaking of quotes, Mike, so there's this rumor going around that insurance rates are going to climb this next year when we come up for renewal. Fact or fiction?
I've heard the same rumor. We've gotten calls from a number of prospects that have proven the rumor to be true in situations where they said, I've gotten a 10, 15, or 5% increase over last year. It kind of depends. We at Avemco, we haven't changed our base rates for several years, and we're not changing our base rates this year. If your policy is renewing as expiring, you haven't hit a threshold of a birthday, let's say age 76 or age 80 or 85, then with an Avemco you would expect to have no increase in your premium unless you did add a lower time pilot or increase the hull value or something.
Well, that is great news. Being an aircraft owner and a policy holder, I'm hoping that your base rates continue to remain stable as throughout the industry for all of us that will be seeking insurance renewals. So that's great to hear. Maybe we can put that rumor to bed or bay. So one last question I wanted to ask you about, and that is those of us that are now flying under basic med rules rather than getting a second or third class or first class medical certificate. Have you have a number of people that insure under basic, that are flying under basic med?
Yes, we've got an awful lot of customers that have converted over to the basic med. Some of them have called us and said, I'm now flying under basic med, is that okay? And the answer is absolutely. Others have just moved on to the basic med program and haven't really notified us, because the question we ask is, do you have a medical for a valid medical for the pilot privileges being exercised? So they can go from a first class to a second class to a third class, pick up basic med. Let's say they got a J3 that meets the definition of light sport, then they can go ahead and fly as a sport pilot, and all they really need to do is keep us apprised that yes, they have a medical valid for the pilot privileges. We haven't had any issues with people flying under the basic med. It's been a great program. Where our claims come from is it's basically pilot skills and lack of currency on there, not necessarily medical incapacitation or medical issues. So if you've got a basic med, we're happy to take care of you. If you're flying an LSA, be it special light sport, experimental light sport, or a home built that meets the definition, or a legacy airplane, we're happy to have you as a sport pilot, like the 102-year-old fellow that passed away, I assume, peacefully in his sleep in Virginia.
Very good. Well, that also is good to know that for those who are flying under basic med, under the privileges of basic med, we still are insurable by Avemco and other insurance agents as well. It's a legal medical certification. And those of you that are flying light sport, the rules are even a bit more relaxed than that. Certainly we don't want people flying with any kind of medical incapacitation, but it's nice to know we've got some privileges and some flexibility in that. That's great to know. That's great to know. And you said also you haven't found, you have not found a preponderance of accidents with people that are flying under basic med. Basically no difference there from other insured people.
That is correct. There's always the exception that'll prove the rule, but statistically from our insurance point of view, it is so remote that it's a non-issue for us.
Very good. Well, that's again good news. Well, Mike, this has been a wonderful opportunity to learn about you and about Avemco Insurance. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for what you and Avemco do for pilots everywhere, particularly those in the Wings program and the like, but providing a very valuable part of our aviation experience, the insurance that keeps us covered. So I wanted to thank you again, and thank you for watching us. This has been great to have you join us for the past 30 minutes, speaking with Mike Adams, Senior Vice President of Avemco Insurance. My name is Ron Timmermans, and I'm one of the hosts with Florida Aviation Network, and we have been broadcasting to you live and in the clear from EAA Sun and Fun International Fly-In and Expo at Lakeland, Florida. I hope to see you back again later this week, and I hope to see you in person here at Lakeland.